Hello everybody, Dr. Phil here. This is going to be a video on the corporation and its shareholders. So learning a little bit more about what a corporation is and the different types of shareholders and stakeholders. So the first thing to understand, and I think everybody would know this, we have basically business and we have society. So business is really the organizations engaged in making a product or providing a service for profit. And of course, it's profit compared to like non-profits. Society is, or one way we could define it, human beings and the social structures they collectively create. So we kind of think of society as this kind of bigger thing, and then business as a smaller part of that, which is well diagrammed and detailed in this graphic we see here. So right, so society is kind of the bigger locum, if you will, and then we have business that's just a part of society. And of course, it's you see the multi-directional arrows or bi-directional arrows because business, of course, is constantly interacting with society and vice versa. So general systems theory, sometimes we abbreviate this GST. Organisms do not exist in isolation, but can only be understood in relationship to their surroundings. So, businesses don't just exist on their own, they obviously exist as part of society and vice versa. Businesses are embedded in a broader social environment with which they constantly interact. So, what is the purpose of the corporation? Why would somebody, or why would an individual set a corporation up? To whom or what should the firm be responsible? So, and that's kind of a loaded question because is it just responsible to its shareholders? Is it responsible to other types of stakeholders, people that live locally, for example? So let's now talk about the shareholder theory of the firm. So this sees the firm as property of the owners or the shareholders. So think about like everybody, all these people, in some cases millions of people, in the case of big companies, they each own just like a share, hence the name shareholders, of a bigger firm. The owner's interests take precedence over the interests of others. So, in most cases, the number one goal for business is to enrich their shareholders. Not to say that there aren't other things they might try to do, maybe stuff for the local community, but the number one goal is to enrich shareholders. The purpose of the firm is to maximize its long-term market value. So think about the share price multiplied by the number of shares. We call that market capitalization. And also money for its shareholders. That could be capital gains as the share price goes up, and it could also be dividends if the firm pays dividends. So corporations serve a broad public purpose, which is to create value for society. Now, profit is necessary for survival, but it's not the only purpose of the firm. Corporations have multiple obligations, and they should consider all stakeholders. So again, now this is a little broader, not just the shareholders, not just the people with a direct financial interest in the entity, but or the enterprise, but also, the people that live locally, vendors. Think about employees of the firm, for example. So the shareholder purpose relates to the owner's needs and wants. So again, and again, in the case of a big farm, there's going to be a lot of those owners, and also shared value. So kind of speaks to what I was saying a second ago about, if you're a shareholder of a firm, you may get dividends, you might not, but it really speaks to, um, you want the stock to go up in value, right? Kind of buy low, sell high, understanding that you will, of course, have a capital gain and you have to pay some tax on that, most likely. And we compare that to sort of the broader stakeholder purpose, which is, what are the stakeholders' needs and wants? So again, we're looking at maybe people that live locally, other constituents. Could also be, like I said before, employees of the firm, the firm's customers. Think about that value or supply chain. The firm's customers, the firm's vendors could also be considered stakeholders. So just think of like shareholder is somebody that owns a share in the company. It's very direct, it's very specific, it's very explicit. More implicitly, stakeholders, think about anybody that could in some way be affected by the firm, whether it be financially or non-financially. So the formal or the more formal definition, stakeholders are persons or groups that affect or are affected by a firm's decisions, policies, and operations. A quote unquote stake is an interest in or claim on a business. Now, stakeholder is not the same as stockholder, as I was just explaining. Again, stakeholders is really anybody that's impacted by the business. Now, to be clear, a stockholder is a type of stakeholder, right? But a stockholder has, again, a direct financial legitimate interest in the business. Stakeholders could be like, people that live close to the business. They don't own shares in that firm necessarily. They may still be affected by the business. So market stakeholders, these could be shareholders, they could be suppliers, employees. Again, think about people that are kind of more like financially dealing with, transacting with the firm. So they engage in economic transactions with the company as it carries out its primary purpose of providing society with goods and services. Non-market stakeholders, think about again neighbors, the community, governments, business support groups, etc. So these are people or groups who, although they do not engage in direct economic exchange with a firm, they're still affected by or can affect the actions of the enterprise. So here we can kind of see, like, from the company standpoint, employees, managers, this is more sort of internal stakeholders, right? Think about the work that's going on inside the firm and contributing to the effort and skill, everyday operations. And then outside the firm, you can see there's a lot more suppliers, could also call that vendors, society, governments, creditors, shareholders, customers. So again, these are all external stakeholders. They may have important transactions with the firm, but they're not on the firm's payroll. And then finally, stakeholder power. So if you are a stakeholder, what are some common things that you might be able to do that might affect or influence the firm, the enterprise? Well, one is voting power, which is the legal right to cast a shareholder vote, but that's only if you're a shareholder, right? And again, that's also only if you own common stock, not preferred. Economic power, the ability to grant or withhold transactions with the focal company. Political power, actions taken through legislation, regulations, or lawsuits. So again, think about, the local municipality in which they live, county commissioners, for example, county councils, the mayors, those types of people, city managers or county managers. Legal power, lawsuits filed against the focal company for harm caused by the firm. So maybe they pollute a local river and that's used as a, tributary for drinking water. So again, there's problem. And then informational power, having access to valuable data, facts, or details. So again, the informational power, just to expand on that a little more, it's a lot easier to access or to get that kind of power now because, of course, the advent and proliferation of the internet. So anyway, that's just a little bit about the firm. Think about like all the different entities that may interact with the firm at varying levels. Again, some financially, some not so much. All right, just a quick one here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in a future video. Take care.